Hello and welcome. I'm Katie Haswell and we are live at the Guyana Space Centre for the third launch of the year. A thoroughly European launch for both civilian and military customers based in Norway, Italy and France. There's Ariane on the pad. On board we've got our two passengers, the telecommunications satellite THOR-7 and the Franco-Italian Armed Forces satellite SICRAL-2. And you can see on the top right-hand side of the screen, there is our countdown. We are 11 minutes and 19 seconds to launch. Ariane 5 is a big and powerful beast. She's made of 4 sections. We call them stages. The first stage are those boosters, roughly the size, the weight of giving thrust of 6 jumbo jets each. The main stage there, the central core stage. And then above that, we have the upper stage, whose job it is to take the satellites to their final position. That weighs roughly the equivalent of a business jet. And above it, the fairing, that pointy bit. Inside there, we have our 2 satellites. You can see them, THOR-7 in the upper position for Telenor satellite broadcasting, weighing in at roughly 4.5 tons. Then you can see below it the black structure, and inside it, SICRAL-2 for Telespazio, and weighing slightly under 4.5 tons. This is the Mission Control Center, about 18 kilometers from the pad. Various different operational teams here. This team is called the Flight Directorate, or the Flight Control Desk. It's Arianespace top management, and they take all the important decisions in the event of unplanned situations, and teams working across the base report directly to them in real time. You'll see them all on the phones. The first satellite to be separated will be THOR-7 for the private Norwegian operator Telenor, and it was built by Space Systems Loral. A couple of key people here in Mission Control. One of those is the Range Operations Manager. Today it's Jean-Luc Voyer. And we have a hold in the countdown. The Range Operations Manager is the person who calls out.
DDO, arrêt du décompte, bulletin rouge, base. Que tous les moyens soient prêts pour la reprise de la chronologie à 0-7 minutes en cas de retour au vert.
So he's just announced that we have a hold in the countdown, and we are going to reset the clock for 8 o'clock UTC. The original launch was scheduled for 1937. And this is a perfectly normal situation. It's a hold in the clock is a well-rehearsed part of any launch. The system is designed specifically for this, and it's why we have the launch window. We have nearly a 2-hour launch window today. The launch window is the time during which we are able to launch, and we have 1 minute and 54 seconds. These are the status panels that you can see on the left-hand side, and they are a little bit like the dashboard in a car or a sort of traffic light situation. Red means stop and green means go. And of course, a launch is only authorized here at the Guyana Space Centre if everything is perfect and all the parameters are according to plan. So the countdown is stopping for about 20 minutes or so. We haven't reached the synchronized sequence yet. Once the synchronized sequence starts again, we'll be able to start counting down in the final countdown. The red panel is at the top. You can see there, autorisation lancement in French, and that is the range. The ensemble de lancement in French actually is the range, and the range encompasses all the facilities here at the base. There are lots of buildings. The base spreads across an area of about 750 kilometres squared. That's roughly half the size of Rome and its suburbs, so it's pretty big, as you can imagine. And across the base there are all sorts of different facilities, all sending their status to these status panels. Right now we don't know which one it is, so we're going to wait and find out. We'll put some words on the screen to give you the rendezvous time. We've reset the clock and we'll be back in just over 20 minutes. For the clock to restart, SICRAL-2 and THOR-7. THOR-7's at the top and SICRAL-2 underneath.
À tous de DDO, attention pour la reprise du temps des comptes. Top. Début de la séquence finale lanceur.
And he's just announced the beginning again of the synchronized sequence. We now have gone into the automated phase. The computers are performing a whole set of checks and controls now before launch, and they're managing a very impressive list of operations. And of course, this is the final phase in a sequence of events bringing us to today.
Most of the elements that make up Ariane 5 come by ship from Europe. They then travel by road to the space base, where their assembly begins in the Launcher Integration Building. Here, the main or lower stage is erected vertically. The two solid boosters, which are made in French Guiana, are transported to this building for positioning on either side of the main stage. Then the upper stage is integrated onto the lower stage, and at this point, Ariane is moved to the final assembly building. The satellites arrived by plane. THOR-7 came on February 20th and SICRAL-2 on March 4th. Satellites also follow a preparation campaign. It is carried out in parallel with assembly of the launch vehicle not far from the launch pad in facilities dedicated to satellite operations. Preparation includes weighing and testing by special teams in clean rooms. All satellite systems are checked, everything from electric cables to solar panels. With these tests completed, the satellites are then filled with the fuel they will need for their lives in space. These white suits worn by the crews are quite heavy. They weigh 17 kilos. Meanwhile, Arianespace and customer teams meet on a daily basis to review campaign activities. In all, a campaign takes 6 weeks to ready both launcher and satellites. When filled, the satellites in their turn move to the final assembly building. Here they are mated atop the launcher. SICRAL-2 was put in place first in the lower position, then THOR-7 was enclosed inside the fairing, which was hoisted atop the launcher. The day before launch, the launcher rolls out to the pad. Here, Ariane 5 awaits the final countdown and the start of her mission.
Top. À 0 moins 1 minute.
1 minute to launch, and we are live at the Guyana Space Center. We are orbiting THOR-7 for Telenor and built by Space Systems Loral, and SICRAL-2 for Telespazio and the French and Italian Ministries of Defense, built by Thales Alenia Space. Our very best wishes to everybody involved in today's launch.
À tous de DDO, attention pour les décomptes finales. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage Vulcain. Allumage EAP, décollage. La propulsion est nominale.
There she goes, hauling herself against the gravity of
La
our
propulsion est
planet.
nominale.
Everything's normal, he says. The propulsion is normal. We broke the sound barrier at 48 seconds after launch and went into Mach 1. And we're only now getting the sound here at the Jupiter Control Center as she flies over. I can feel the ground shaking. Blazing a trail across the sky here at the Guyana Space
Tous les
Center.
paramètres à bord sont nominaux.
After the initial 13-second vertical climb, we rotated to the east and we're heading out over the Atlantic Ocean. We're burning 3 engines, but the boosters, those 2 big boosters, are doing all the work right now. They're providing 90% of our thrust. And if we get lucky, we might even see them falling away with the naked eye. The boosters are burning at 3,000 degrees Celsius, and
La
the
propulsion est nominale.
main stage that they're attached to is at virtually at absolute zero, so you can imagine the incredible complexities of the temperatures there, a feat of human engineering. And those boosters,
Séparation des étages d'accélération à poudre.
are falling away. We've had confirmation there. We can see them, the 2 dots, just through the clouds, falling back to Earth. They've burnt
La
their
propulsion
propellant.
est nominale.
We don't need them anymore. And we've lost about 3/4 of our mass in just over 2 minutes. So now we're burning the main stage. You can see it there, the grey structure, the big
La
tank,
trajectoire est nominale.
a huge tank of cryogenic propellant. It's going to burn for about 9 minutes. And you can see at the front there, the fairing on the right-hand side. You can see the image there. The fairing is the nose of the vehicle, protecting our
Tous les paramètres à
satellites
bord sont nominaux.
from the rigors of the launch, from the sound and the acoustic waves at launch. It's obviously very, very loud.
Largage de la coiffe.
And of course, friction. If you look at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you can see we're 114 kilometers above the Earth. That means we're on the outer edge of the atmosphere. There's no friction anymore. We're on the edge of space, and we don't need the fairing. So it falls back down to Earth, and we can see THOR-7, our first satellite
La
there.
trajectoire est nominale.
He said everything's going according to plan. We can see THOR-7 at the front for the very first time, and the 2 grey rectangles are the solar panels. Behind it, we can't see it now because it's hidden under the cylinder, is SICRAL-2. We're powering across the Atlantic using the Vulcan engine. It's very powerful.
Propulsion est nominale.
It burns 320 kilograms of propellant a second. That's about 500 times more than a jet engine. The computer-generated images that we're looking at are showing us what the experts have planned and calculated is happening to the launcher.
Tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux.
He says, tous les paramètres à bord sont normaux. All the parameters on board are normal. And, we're seeing there the tracking station at Galileo. That's the tracking station at the Guyana Space Center. And the computer-generated images are what's actually happening in space. Basically, the teams plan a very precise schedule of events based on extremely accurate
Trajectoire est
predictions.
nominale.
And they put all of that information into the computer. And these images are a simulation of those predictions. We took off 5 minutes and 23 seconds ago. As I was mentioning, these computer-generated images are really showing us pretty well what's happening, exactly what we're expecting to be happening.
La propulsion est nominale.
And there we go, another replay there of our superb launch. The folk in mission control. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see our altitude there on the left-hand side. We are 163 kilometers above the Earth. In the middle, you can see the distance. That's the distance from the pad if you were to draw a line across the ground. And on the bottom right-hand side is our speed. At the moment, we are traveling at 4.29 kilometers per second, ladies and gentlemen. Let me, boys and girls, let me remind you that's per second, not per hour. So we are traveling at phenomenal speeds. And we're heading out across the Atlantic. He says we've got 2 minutes left of propulsion on the main stage. Our flight path takes us along the equator towards Africa. And we'll start separating the satellites just over the east coast of Africa. Picking up speed all the time here. You can see the trajectory on the top right-hand side of the screen. The curve is the predicted trajectory of the vehicle, and the dot is the actual position of the launcher. And we're tracking our launcher using ground stations as she flies over. It's called telemetry. They've got great big dishes, a bit like ears. They're listening out for the launcher. And Ariane sends data to those ground stations, which tells us how the flight is progressing in real time. And later we can see how the vehicle performed in a process which is called the Level 0 flight evaluation. And you can see there we're picking up the signal there at the next tracking station in Natal on the right, on the northeastern coast there. In Brazil, he's just given us the confirmation there that we've picked up the signal. So we've travelled from Galileo, you can see as the tracking station there on the left, on the west, in the Guyana Space Center, and Natal in the northeastern coast of Brazil. Quite a lot of advantages for launching from the equator. It's the fastest route to geostationary orbit. And also, the natural rotation of the Earth gives us additional speed on the equator. So if you think about it, the launcher is actually already moving in the right direction, even when it's on the pad. Obviously, that's when we're launching to the east, of course.
Fin de propulsion de l'étage principal cryotechnique.
Main stage has cut off its engine. It's burnt all its propellant.
Séparation EPC.
And it's falling back down. There are images from a previous launch. We had cameras on board a previous launch. Look at that, superb. And you can see the curvature of the Earth and the main stage as it falls back down there. So we are now entering the next phase of the flight. The upper stage has taken the wheel, and its job is to deliver our satellites to their orbit. We're shedding weight, of course. We started with 774 tons, and we've got about 3% of that left. The lighter we are, the faster we go. Might seem obvious to us now, but it wasn't always, actually. It was, of course, Sir Isaac Newton who identified that back in the 1680s. That's when he presented his 3 laws of motion. And then about 20 years earlier, he'd developed his theories about gravity. And of course, that was when an apple fell on his head. And he was only 23 years old at the time. So it's quite remarkable. Of course, most of the laws at the heart of that are also at the heart of rocket science. And unbelievably, we crossed Africa during that film. The tracking station in Libreville picked up the signal about 5 minutes ago as a SICRAL program director. And that's on the west coast of Africa in Gabon. And then Malindi in Kenya has just picked up the signal, and which means we're now over the east coast of Africa. And Malindi will be tracking us from now on. We're really climbing into space. You can see there on the right-hand side the trajectory and our altitude there, 500 and coming up to 500, well, 532 kilometers above the Earth. We're traveling at a speed of 9.23 kilometers per second. We're getting close now to the point where we'll be switching off our engine. And to do that, we need to get to 635 kilometers above the Earth. That's another 100 kilometers to go, and you'll see that we're going to do that very quickly. How does the onboard computer know when to send the cutoff command? Well, it's very clever. It has its inertial guidance system, which senses the orientation of the launcher. You can see there the scheduled cutoff time. We've switched off our engine and we're entering what we now call the ballistic phase.
Extinction de l'étage supérieur cryotechnique.
We have confirmation there from the range operations manager that we've switched off the engine. The upper stage is now entering the ballistic phase. Ballistic actually means without propulsion.
Because de la manœuvre d'orientation au profit de la charge utile haute THOR-7.
We're traveling high enough and fast enough to cruise without the engine, and this actually means that we are now on our orbit. We have to climb a little bit higher before we can start separating THOR-7. Our separation orbit is actually 1,126 kilometers altitude. It's going to take us another 3 minutes or so to get there. And just out of interest, SICRAL-2's injection orbit will be 2,427 kilometers above the Earth. That's about 1,300 kilometers higher than THOR-7. So we're now going through a very carefully planned set of maneuvers, and we call this the space ballet because it's a bit of a dance in its own right. The upper stage is orientating the satellites. Once we release them, they continue their journey on their own. They'll have to travel for about 5 days to get to their final orbits. They'll have to climb up to 36,000 kilometers above our planet. And in order for them to do that, we have to put them in a very precise position, a very precise attitude. And in order to do this, the upper stage has a brain. It's controlling all of these maneuvers, and it's in what we call the vehicle equipment bay. It's very smart. It's made of 2 computers, and it can even take its own decisions. It takes into account information from the tank, from the engines, etc. And then if there are different options, it always chooses the one which maximizes the success of the mission. Every satellite has to be positioned into a different orbit, and the upper stage has to twist in any direction that we want in order to be able to do that. And it has 6 thrusters, which give tiny little bursts of gas. And those thrusters can move it in any direction we need it to go. Don't need much power to do that. So we're getting close now to what we call the injection point. That's where we will separate the first satellite, THOR-7. Remember, the altitude was 1,126 kilometers. Getting close. Concentration levels very high at this point as we wait for separation.
Séparation de la charge utile THOR-7.
And we have confirmation there that we have separated THOR-7, our first satellite. Congratulations to Telenor and Space Systems Loral and all the teams involved. Now we can see it separating there. It's actually being pinged into space by a set of springs.
Au profit du SILDA.
a set of springs, a little bit like a jack-in-a-box. When you open the box, it pops out, and that's exactly what happens. We can see THOR-7 moving away there. It's all very carefully planned in order to avoid parts bumping into each other in space. It's called collision avoidance. So THOR-7's now heading out on its own journey. It's got to get to its orbital slot, which is 0.8 degrees west. And it's got to climb to 36,000 kilometers above the Earth. It's going to take it 5 days to get there. In the meantime, we'll still have SICRAL-2 attached. It's underneath that black structure, the cylinder. And so Ariane has more work to do. We need to climb to 2,400. And he's telling us that all the maneuvers are going nominally according to plan. It's going to take us another 4 minutes or so to get to our next separation orbit. We've got a few more maneuvers to perform before we can get there. And right now, it's the teams in Malindi who are receiving the information and sending it to them, to the CVI. Important time for all the teams tracking the vehicle. Everyone's poring over the data right now and concentrating hard. This is the third launch this year from the Guyana Space Centre. We had 3 launches using 3 different vehicles for 3 different applications. The first launch was the baby of the family. That was back in February. Vega orbited a European Space Agency craft. And then we had in March Soyuz, the medium lifter. If you think of Mummy Bear, Baby Bear and Daddy Bear, Soyuz would be Mummy Bear. And today, of course, Ariane 5, Daddy Bear, taking THOR-7 and SICRAL-2 into space. Ariane 5 is the only vehicle in the world that can hoist 2 4 to 5 ton satellites into space at the same time. That's the black structure moving away, the cylinder.
Préparation du système de lancement double Ariane.
Known in French as the Système de Lancement Double Ariane. The cylinder performs various functions. It's a little bit like a fairing. It protects the lower satellite, and it also provides the attachment system. And there we can see on the right-hand side SICRAL-2 for the first time. And we can see its solar panels there. And that cylinder
Manœuvre d'orientation au profit de SICRAL-2.
The cylinder is what makes those dual launches possible on Ariane 5. And SICRAL-2 is the 63rd military payload launched by Ariane Space. We're at 2,276 kilometers above the Earth, and if you look at our speed, we've slowed down fractionally. That's because we've switched off our engine. We're travelling now at 8.13 kilometers per second. 12.5 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers from the pad if we were to draw a line across the ground. And we're coming up on separation now of our second satellite. The mood here, very focused. High levels of concentration. People have been working very hard on both of these projects. Some people working even for years. And teams have been working very hard over the last few days.
Séparation de la charge utile SICRAL-2.
And we have separation of the SICRAL-2 military telecommunications satellite. Congratulations to everybody at Telespazio, Thales Space, and the French and Italian Ministries of Defence. It's been a great campaign. Well done to all the teams. And to Telenor and Space Systems Loral. A job well done there. Ariane has delivered the satellites, but the work is just beginning now for everybody in the ground stations. They're taking charge of those satellites and monitoring the first maneuvers. For SICRAL-2, 8 minutes after separation, the teams will be receiving the signal, and then a bit later the solar rays will partially deploy. And then in 8 days' time, the engine will switch on. Well, it's a big day for everybody, the culmination of many months and for some years, many years' work. And to the Italian and French MODs. 2 satellites now heading out on their journey to their final orbit. The best of luck to all the teams for the next phase of your operations. Thanks for joining us here live at the Guyana Space Centre. From me, Katie Haswell, goodbye.